We're on? All right.
Pull my Zoom back up real quick. There we go. Okay.
Perfect. All right. Welcome back, everybody, to Sunday Night with Global Strangeness. And then there were two. Tonight, it's just Scott and myself, Debra. We are missing Jeremy. He either had to take a week off for something, or he made out with one of those nasty little fae people last week and is serving 7 years of servitude. I don't know. We'll see next week if he shows back up.
He's reading his Bigfoot.
Yeah,
Bigfoot
yeah.
smut.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a whole episode I'd like to. It's hilarious. So this week it's just the two of us, and we're just going to be sharing some local ghost stories from our respective towns. Are you like right? Did you stay right in your hometown there where you're living, or?
Yeah, I stayed in Utah. Not a ton in Utah, but I got a couple stories.
Yeah. So, and same. I mean, there's a few. Nothing like no poltergeist, no real, the real scary stuff. But there's definitely some older buildings here, and they are famously haunted. Most of them have been in Alberta's most haunted places. So,
how old is Alberta?
Oh God, would you quit doing history lessons? Live? I don't know. Google.
It's a couple hundred years at least, right?
Yes, yeah. For sure. So some of these buildings are 100 years old. So yes.
Yeah, ours like goes back 150 years, and that's. I mean, there were Native Americans. I got yelled at on Facebook, but since people colonized Utah, it's not that old. Yeah,
I don't like. It would be so cool to go to say England or someplace that has really old buildings. I mean, I think that would be.
Yeah.
That'd be so cool. But
the Roman Colosseum, like.
Yeah, but I mean, yeah, we're pretty new. None of our buildings are, that old or whatever. So we have baby ghosts.
Newbies.
Yeah. So I don't know. Did you want to just go one for one? Because we each, I think, have 3 or whatever. So
yeah, that works out. Okay.
Or did you want to shoot from the hip? You go first, or?
Okay, I'll go first. So back into some more history, because I know Debra loves history so much. Have you ever heard of the Mountain Meadows Massacre?
That sounds familiar. I don't. Okay, so I'm not sure, but it sounds familiar.
So it's, there weren't a ton of tragedies that happened in Utah, but there was one that got kind of blamed on the Mormon Church. So when the Mormon Church was fleeing New York after they got kicked out of New York, they headed to Missouri, and that didn't last too long. They actually had a law in effect until 1976 that you were allowed to exterminate Mormons on site. So it's one of those goofy laws that didn't get redacted until 1976. But, the Mormons would show up and steal everyone's wives, and they ended up going to Utah. So at the time, Utah was outside of U.S. territory. And then we fast forward to the Mexican-American War, and surprise, they were right back under U.S. control. So this caused a bunch of serious tension for the Latter-day Saints, since the president at the time, James Buchanan, sent a large amount of troops to Utah to replace Brigham Young. Brigham Young's like at the time after Joseph Smith died, he was like the main leader of the Mormon Church. So preparing for upcoming war, the LDS people were all told to start stockpiling their food and supplies and stuff. And this was all fine until a caravan of immigrants heading to California showed up. And so they went to the town of Cedar City, and they were trying to trade for supplies. Not a lot of trade routes back in the 1800s, and they wouldn't trade with them because they're supposed to be stockpiling for this war. So the mayor, Isaac Haight, they started making threats against him, and he got a little scared, and he went to the district militia major, William Dame, asking for the Mormon militia to come and help him arrest these caravan of immigrants. Dame rejected his requests, telling Haight that words are but wind, they injure no one. So Haight came up with this plan where he was going to sort of blame it on the Native Americans. He started riling up all the Native Americans to go after this caravan. And that Mormon town of Cedar City, their militia was acting with the Native Americans. So they went out to the 2 scouting parties and they tried to kill the 2 dudes that were out getting cattle. They only killed one, and the other dude ran back to the caravan and told him that white men were in on it too. So they knew the Mormons were in on it as well. And then that all blew up in Haight's face. So, you know, they could only do one thing. They had to exterminate all of those people. So they killed 120 people out of that caravan, and they only left 17 children under the age of 6. So that's like the Mountain Meadows Massacre. Is the Native Americans and the Mormons came and slaughtered 120 caravan. Just
because they didn't want to trade their corn or whatever.
Yeah, they were scared. The caravan was kind of making idle threats, and that happened on September 11th, which is kind of crazy. 1857. It was a 5-day war, but like I said, they killed everyone besides the children older than 6 or younger than 6. So, but I mean, you know, it's like sort of our Gettysburg. You know, it's got some bad juju going on, but and to be fair, before I get out of the history, this is blamed on the Mormons, but Brigham Young wanted nothing to do with this. Most of the other Mormons wanted nothing to do with this. This was like a southern part of Utah, southern colony. So that's what happened. But some of the there's a memorial there right now. And let me find out where this is. So one of the biggest feelings when you go visit this memorial is everybody reports that they feel like people are watching them. So more just a feeling, but there's some other common reports of people claiming to hear either men screaming, children crying, or the sounds of women calling out to their loved ones. There's been other reports of children running through the woods and then disappearing in the brush. Numerous claims of women wandering, or one woman wandering around. This is like a single entity that's been seen multiple times. It's a woman wandering around. She looks really confused and she's looking for something or someone. And then there's a lot of sightings of balls of light just sort of floating around the area. And they're all claimed to be different colors. So, but nothing too crazy happens there. One of the crazier sightings is of an old man. People claim to see this old man in like 1800s clothing sitting on the memorial with his hands covering his face, crying, and then he just sort of disappears, and that happens in broad daylight. But like I said, that's, you know, pretty bad massacre, our Gettysburg, but not a whole lot of.
That's kind of tame hauntings considering how violent it was and how, you know.
Yeah.
I wonder if anybody's camped out overnight or anything.
I've watched a ton of these ghost hunters go, and
yeah,
but I mean, all of my stories, I watched them. Wasn't anything really good. No Amityville house or anything.
Right,
you know?
yeah. Which, I mean, that's probably a good thing if it's, you know, close to where you live, but.
Yeah. Maybe that Mormon juju keeps all the bad juju away, you know? Could be.
Yeah. I mean, you think anywhere where there's just, you know, so many lives taken so quickly like that, there's going to be some residual energy of some sort or whatever. But yeah, you think there'd be some angry ghosts there, like really, you know?
Yeah, I tried digging in deep, but I mean, that was the biggest biggest stuff to come up. So
yeah.
You're going to be carrying us on this episode.
Yeah, I don't know. So what we have, the first one I wanted to talk about was a famous tea house we have here, and I've been in it, and it is so cool. It's like a Queen Anne revival style Edwardian kind of house. So it's got like the 3-story turret that's completely round with like the windows all around it and wraparound deck.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's just gorgeous, and I'm glad that they kept it. So it was originally an old farmhouse, and the Conquest family had it forever and ever and ever. And so it was built in 1911. And then in the 1970s, they actually moved it. So this is a huge house. Like, I can't even imagine.
They moved it?
They moved it. They picked it up off its foundation and they moved it to Bower Ponds where it sits now. And it's like a historical house, and it's a tea house now. So you can go in and have lunch there and whatever. And you can take a tour upstairs and you can hear all the ghost stories. And they have photographs there of like the blurry image of the ghosts and everything. So it's really quite cool. And so it's so cool that they actually kept it. But so the last known inhabitant was Elias Cronquist. He was the last person of the Cronquist family. And that's who had it when it was in its original spot. And it was kind of a farmhouse or whatever. And he was a really weird duck, I guess. He got kind of like a recluse in his old age, and he lived for years and years and years. Nobody really saw him. And he kind of stayed up in one of the upper floors in like the dirt, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody would see him. Like, he was a bit of a, he was interesting fellow. And so anyways, when he passed on, they were building the city out and they needed that farmland to kind of build the city out. And that's when they kept the house. They moved it to where its position is now. And apparently Elias is still in that house, and that ticked him off. And he's kind of like, he'll stomp and slam doors. And they, because it's a business, there's an alarm system, and the alarm system will go off all the time. And there's a lady, Elizabeth Plumtree, she was like the, or she ran the business or whatever of the tea house and everything. And she's come in, and there's like the swinging door, and it was like swinging, like swinging, like really aggressively. And she was all alone in there. There was nobody there. If somebody had been there, it should have set off the alarm because she was just coming in. So things like the tea settings move around all the time. They'll set the tea up. It's really cute because they have all these like old-fashioned, different, actual China tea.
Like
it's
China
really,
stuff.
yes, it's so cute. It's so cute. They're just, and they do like homemade breads and soups. And here's the fat kid in me, but it's really good food. It's all homemade, just so cool. And it's overlooking a little pond. But anyways, they'll set up the tea room for the, lunch, the first, when they're opening or whatever. And then they come back in and the chairs are moved and the teacups are all like, moved around and messed around with. So he does that all the time. And when you hear the footsteps, like he's stomping, like they think he's mad because they moved the house and he wanted to stay in his bedroom where it was ever and ever. So, and I thought it was cool because when I went there, I did take the tour upstairs. And it does have a weird feeling to it. Like, you do feel like there's history, how when you're in an old building and there's supposedly spirits around. And I looked through the photo album of all the photos that they captured, and there's, I don't know how to debunk this or not, but there's like, kind of figures in them, like little white misty figures in there. So yeah. But yeah, it is pretty cool building, and as a house, I love old houses, so it's just gorgeous.
So what do you think would happen if they brought one of those like 1,000-year-old houses from Europe into America?
Moved it, right? Like, how would that be to,
Do you think the ghost from Europe would stay in the house, or?
Well, I think it depends. Like in this case, he's attached to that house. Like, he was like weirdly attached to the house when he was living. So probably, right? Same the haunted objects, if something's attached to the actual thing.
Yeah.
And a lot of time, I think people get really attached to houses. They probably would move. They'd probably be mad.
Yeah.
See how stirred up you can get a ghost.
Well, our climate's better. You move him into like Southern California or something. He's got nothing to complain about.
Get a better tan here, so yeah. So, well, that's one of mine, anyways. So we're back to you now.
Okay, so which one am I doing here? Okay, this one's kind of a fun story, and I tried. Man, it was so hard to find like actual facts about these things.
Mm-hmm.
But this one is the Ghoul of the Great Salt Lake. So this story begins again in the 1860s with a man named John Baptiste. And Baptiste was working as a grave digger at the time in Salt Lake County. He didn't have any other family or friends really. They had no idea where he came from. They think he might have come from Ireland. But in 1862, a man named Clausen attacked the governor at the time, John Dawson. And during the attack, that Clausen guy lost his life. And at first, nobody claimed the body. So they buried the body. And then later, his brother came and exhumed him so he could move him back to his hometown cemetery. And when they dug him up, Mr. Clausen was face down, completely naked. So they started an investigation, and they found his clothing and personal belongings in a box in John Baptiste's house, along with 300 other boxes of the dead's soiled clothing and personal belongings.
So he had a hobby.
He had a hobby, yeah, I get, or maybe you're selling soiled dead people clothes back then. I don't know. But you know, shortly afterwards, they convicted John Baptiste of grave robbing, but they didn't want to put him in the regular prison because they figured that all the other inmates would murder him because it was such a weird thing at the time, you know. So they oh man, they just sent him out to this island in the Great Salt Lakes. They excommunicated him out into that island. And there was nothing on the island besides somebody's cows and one shack. So a couple weeks later, the cattle farmer came back to check on his cows, and he saw Baptiste sitting on the tallest hill there, just sort of looking out into the lake. But then the next time they went back out, Baptiste was gone. No trace of him was ever found. So soon after, people started reporting seeing like a ghoulish-like figure stalking the banks of the lake. And then in 1895, the Salt Lake Herald ran a story claiming that the Native Americans wouldn't stay at night by the lake because they feared the evil spirits. And then other people reported hearing an ungodly screams, which if you've heard an elk, that's an ungodly scream right there. Yeah. And then animals, they said anytime animals would go down there at night, they would get agitated and want to leave. And then around the same time, I think it was 1896, I didn't write the date down, but they found skeleton remains clad in chains at the Jordan River, which connects over there. That's where I go fishing. And I actually have a ghost story from the Jordan River. But you know, since then, people still report seeing like a little ghoulish figure walking around, and you know.
So was he chained up though in that cabin, or? I
guess he had shackles on, but he wasn't like chained together.
Yeah, yeah.
The only thing I mean, there were cattle on this island, right? So there had to be some fresh water for the cattle because the Salt Lake is saltier than the ocean.
Yeah, yeah.
So, I mean, he had to have some access to fresh water, but also you could swim across the lake, you know?
Yeah, that's why I was asking if he was all chained up or whatever, and also if the apparition has chains on. But no. I mean, nowadays, I mean, with the price of groceries and stuff, you get a shack, you got beef.
Yeah.
Peace and quiet. I don't know. Is that
if there were fish, man?
And a nice roast for dinner. I don't know.
The Salt Lake, I mean, it's bigger than Utah Lake. Utah Lake's the biggest non-man-made freshwater lake on the West Coast. And that has an island too. But yeah, I mean, if I lived on a shack on that island, didn't have to go to work, it'd be pretty cool.
That's as good as jail can get, I think. I don't know.
Yeah, better than going into the general population, I guess.
So what's your, like you said, you have a ghost story. Was it him? Was it something?
So no, it wasn't actually a ghost story. It was really weird, and it happened twice. So like a half a mile away, we have the Jordan River. That's where I go bait fishing.
Yeah.
So we go over there at night sometimes, and both times I was with my middle son, and we were fishing on this bridge, and we heard this like crazy scream. both times. And then the whole bridge, like somebody slammed the bridge. It just shook. Like it's a huge bridge, like 50 feet long. Well, probably 60, 70 feet long.
Yeah.
Huge bridge. And we heard this, like, I don't know. I looked up cat noises. It doesn't sound like an elk. I don't know what the hell it was, but it was like, it was crazy, man.
That's so cool, because maybe that's what they were hearing when they were,
Yeah, no, it could have been for sure, but it's scared us. And then when we were leaving, we rode our bikes over there. Both of our tires were popped, on both bikes. Yeah.
Okay, that's the best ghost story so far.
It was pretty crazy.
Scary. Yeah.
I always see that kind of stuff. One time we were at Winco and we were coming out and we saw a red ball of light and it was just hovering there. I got like, I don't know, 5 seconds of it recorded.
Yeah.
But then it just sort of dropped to the ground. And I think there's probably a good possibility it was one of those Chinese lanterns, but it was just this orange ball floating like right above where our house would have been from the grocery store. And then it just fell to the ground.
And you didn't find it, find the little lamp anywhere, or
No, this is pretty suburban area, but I asked on Facebook if anybody had seen it in the local groups. Nobody mentioned anything about it. So
yeah, that could be. But the bridge thing, that would freak me out.
Bridge thing was scary.
Yeah, especially if you got a bike with popped tires. Like, how the hell are you even getting out of there?
Yeah, we were pretty deep down in the river too, so it took us a while to walk back.
So were you trying to pretend you're all like, because you're with your kid, right? So you're like, it's okay, like, or were you just like every man for himself and trying to get out of there fast?
My kid doesn't believe in that stuff at all. And yeah, we were both kind of freaked out, like, because we had the tablet set up, we were cooking, we had it all set up, and it was just like, pack it up real quick.
Pack it up and get out of there.
Yeah. And then it happened again, but we've been back since then. It hasn't happened.
That would be a good one to get on recording if you could, or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
Really cool. Yeah. So, well, that was actually pretty good. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I don't know, we don't have like fun stories like that, but we have our downtown core has a lot of old buildings. Like the courthouse is supposedly haunted. It was a residential house before, so there's a ghost in there. And then there's another building, and it's called Park Place now, and it's a building, and it's got some businesses in the basement, and then some other business or on the main floor, and then some other businesses up above. But at one time it was called the Park Hotel. And when it was the Park Hotel, it was like a seedy stripper type bar or whatever. And it was that for a long, long time. Like, even that's probably the scariest thing that happened in there, really. But anyways, it's quite, yeah, whatever. But before that, the building was actually called the Alexandra Hotel, and it was built like 100 years ago. So it's an older building for our town, anyways. And apparently, now that there's all these businesses in there, a lot of people are reporting getting feelings like they're being watched, and like there's been this lady, and she's seen quite often. She's never speaks to anybody, but she's seen all the time, and she's wearing old like Victorian type or Edwardian type clothing.
Mm-hmm.
So they'll see her, like, I guess fairly good actual view of an outline of, they can see what she looks like and everything. And she's, she'll go through the hallway and then into the basement, or she'll cross the hallways upstairs. And a lot of the staff and people don't like to go into the basement just because it's got a, disapproving feeling. So I have to laugh, because if it, I wonder what she thought of when it was the strip joint, if she's this prim proper,
Oh, so she wasn't there during that time.
Well, I think she was, but I mean,
oh, okay.
It's employees that see her and whatever. But I wonder what she thought of everything going on in the building, if that's her building from what back hotel, nicer hotel. But and across the street, there's another kind of building, and it's got a kind of seedy little bar, and then it's also got some living accommodations for not the homeless people, but people that are just kind of transitioning to get back into into
a halfway house.
Yeah, it's kind of like that. I don't know what they call it exactly, but it's like, so they have
above a bar.
Yeah, it's far down. I know, right? Who's thinking
Bad placement.
this? Yeah, no. But anyway, so they have a bunch of, living accommodations up there in that building too. My son actually worked there because he's a psychologist now, but he was doing practicums in places, so he was working with in some of these um rehabilitation type, jobs or whatever over the summers. And so none of the employees there want to go in the basement because I guess that basement feels really creepy. It's like dark and it's just, you feel like you're not alone, but it's not it's not like the old lady ghost. It's something kind of feels really uncomfortable. They don't see anything, but stuff will tip over and stuff will get moved and whatever, and people just don't go down there.
Yeah.
It's pretty creepy, I guess. So
somebody's got to go down there.
Well, somebody's got to, but I think they draw straws and whoever,
That's a crappy job.
It's not, nobody's volunteering down there at all. It's very uneasy feeling, I guess, down there, and stuff moving, but nobody sees anything. There's no orbs and there's no actual spirits that have been seen, as far as I know. Yeah. So that's our downtown core. Nothing cool. No shaking bridges or whatever. Like, oh.
Yeah, no, I mean, we don't really have too much. I wonder what Jeremy would have had, because he's in, where is he?
I don't remember actually where he's from.
Yeah, I don't remember where he's from either. I know it's like north, like he's the Midwest up north, right?
Yeah.
It's probably some cool stuff.
Yeah, I think he's got some stories. Yeah.
Where I grew up, the most haunted place, and this is actually like in the local paranormal place, is the Jack in the Box off of 10th and K. So, I mean, that place, not even 100 years old. So the whole haunting thing wasn't as big there.
Yeah.
In California. Well, the part of California we were in. But
how often do you think a place is haunted and like stuff is moving around, especially if it's a work, like you're working in a restaurant, but it used to be something else, and stuff gets moved, but people just don't notice, right? It's loud, it's noisy, and it's.
Yeah. One of my first jobs, I was a janitor at a movie theater.
Yeah.
And we would go in after the people that worked at the movie theater were out, and that was kind of creepy. Probably like a 30 or 40-year-old movie theater. But
yeah, they're always
not anything that was hundreds of years old. Thank God.
I used to work at a BP's a long time ago in Calgary, actually, and we had a cook, and he had worked there his whole life. It was just, he loved it, and he passed away, and he had a belt buckle that he always was like one of those big belt buckles, and it was there at the restaurant, and we'd find it would move around all the time. And same, we'd come, like you come, you put the chairs up on top of the tables for the cleaners or whatever at the end of the night, and you come back and they're like moved, like things would move around and stuff. So that was kind of cool. But like we knew him, like we actually worked with him, but his like that belt buckle, I swear to God, moved around all the time, and stuff would move around, and it was him.
Your definition of cool and mine are totally different. Totally different. Well, I would have quit.
Yeah, no, and it was funny. It was like, we talk about it. It was just like, oh yeah, I don't want to say his name. I don't know if I should do this on a recording, but yeah, he just, he was here. He was messing around with the chairs and keep them. And we like say, I'm like, stop, like, leave the chairs around. I want to get out of here. It's my shift's over or whatever. Like,
did you ever have to be there by yourself?
No, there was always at least two people in the building or whatever.
Okay.
I'm sure the owner, he probably spent time in there alone or whatever, but it didn't feel scary or mean or whatever. So, again, I don't know. I think that kind of stuff probably happens a lot and people just don't even notice it.
Yeah, well, like some people, my son, he doesn't think any of that stuff's real, but when it's undeniable right in his face, he's ready to get out of there.
And like something moving around, you can kind of just be like, oh, well, maybe I moved it and forgot, or somebody did. Like, you excuse it, you know what I mean? Until it's happening too much. But all the stools and whatever in the bar part to be moved, like, and nobody did that, that just happened,
What would you do if you were at your house and you saw some sort of paranormal activity where you just like walked out of the kitchen and then you walked back in and everything was just everywhere?
Well, I've never had anything. I've had small things move around, but I've never had that where it's like something angry. Because I feel like if everything, all the pots and pans are out, or that big of activity, I feel like that's some anger or some big emotion behind it. So that's a little scarier, right?
Oh, hell yeah. But you were talking about just telling them to go. I
Well,
think
you
I'd be
do.
the
That's what you
one
have to do.
going,
You have to tell them to go. What are you gonna do?
packing up. I'm
No,
packing up and getting out of there.
no, you can't. They can't be in your space if you tell them to leave. They have to leave your space. That's one. So
I
yeah,
I would love to get somebody who's had something like that. When YouTube first came out, there was a guy who recorded his house and he was supposed to have like
yeah,
a poltergeist, but I realistically think he was just really good at the special effects type
right,
thing.
yeah,
But he would leave the cameras and then it would show like, the whole kitchen getting torn apart.
yeah.
But it would be cool to interview somebody who actually,
Had some real scary. So there's a house by Edmonton. I think it's more by Bakerville or whatever, but it's supposedly one of the most haunted places, like for a terrible haunting in Alberta. And they've had all kinds of teams come out as a farmhouse, and it's like poltergeist activity. So it's like that, like stuff, flying across the room, all the books, come knocking off, and you have to duck. And it's like it's really active. It's really scary active. We've had priests come and it didn't, settles down for a bit and then it comes back. So yeah, I've never experienced anything like that where it's like, angry and determined to stay. But
yeah. Does
yeah,
somebody live in there or is it a business now?
no, I think like that was a house, like that's a farmhouse. And when the last article that I ever read about it, there was people living there still and they were dealing with it. Like they were trying to have people come and see and help or whatever. But I don't know if it's sold. Like that was a little while ago. I should look that house up again because yeah, it was crazy activity. It was people would come, how paranormal teams show up and then they barely ever catch anything, or it's could be something. But this was like seriously, like people are ducking because the books are flying by your head and stuff is happening constantly.
Yeah. Well, I know we have that Skinwalker Ranch and there were people living there, right? And they try to play that up as a hoax. But
Yeah.
some billionaire came and bought the property and they're doing all sorts of testing and stuff on it. So like, what's up with that, right? If it was all just a hoax, why?
Why are you sinking that kind of money into it? Yeah.
I've heard that, and I've watched YouTubers because I've thought about driving up there. But if you stop inside that town, the police are just going up and down the road and they'll tell you to leave. So like
That's
stuff.
that's scary in itself. Like so then that makes you want to go more, right?
No,
Like,
that's why I want to go.
yeah. Like don't tell me no, because now I really want to go.
I just want to, drive and park not on the ranch, but look towards the ranch. And
Yeah.
I'm curious, I want to know if it's for real at a safe distance.
Yeah. Yeah. Take
At
more
a,
than a bicycle. Yeah.
at a safe distance.
Yeah.
Okay. My last story. So this is probably one of the biggest like ghost lore for all of Salt Lake City. It doesn't have a happy ending though. So it's American Fork Canyon, and there's actually Timpanogos Cave. There's a couple different places in this canyon that are haunted. I'm going to go into one of the stories. But this place, we went camping up in this canyon. Nothing scary happened when we were there. If you're a rock climber, this has got to be like the greatest campsite in the world because you camp right on the side of the cliffs where they rock climb.
Oh no, that's scarier than the ghost.
Yeah, it seems so peaceful. You don't have any cell signal up there, but
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't feel any paranormal stuff at all. But this one is the Hermit of American Fork Canyon. I got most of the information from KSL, the news channel out here. So this goes back to the 1870s. A man by the name of Edward Hines was a miner up in American Fork Canyon. And at that time, there was plenty of work. There were like 780 mines, but the winters were rough. So one day, two of his fellow miners went to check on Ed, and he wasn't doing so good. So they took him back to their cabin and made him some food. And they said Ed would just eat and eat and eat and eat. And they tried to convince him to stay at their cabin, but Ed decided to go back to his house that night. A few days passed. They didn't notice Ed. They went to check on him, and he had eaten himself to death. So, yeah, this is like the most popular story for Salt Lake County. From that day on, it's said that Ed has been haunting the canyon. People have reported hearing someone like rummaging through their stuff when they're in their tents, or like hearing them walk around the campsite. There's been reports of people picking up a hitchhiker that's supposed to be Ed, dressed in like old miner's clothes, and then he just disappears from the car after you pick him up.
Oh, that would be creepy.
There's another story in the same spot where you do donuts in this specific campground. You do 3 donuts and then the hearse chases you. I couldn't find anything good on that.
How
But
many things do you have to have first before that one happens?
I watched 2 kids try to do it, and the parking lot wasn't actually big enough for them to do donuts in. So probably take that one with a grain of salt.
Yeah.
And like I said, if you look for this story, about 95, almost every percentage of the time, even the news channel posted that story. But if you really want to find out what happened to Ed, there's a YouTube channel called The Dead History. And it's like, this lady does great YouTubes where she digs into everything of these specific legends.
Yeah.
And it looks like she might have quit doing it. She hasn't done one in a year, but they were amazing. Amazing research. It's called The Dead History. And she traced Ed way back to when he was a horse-drawn ferry captain in New York. Then he apparently fell in love with a woman, but her father wouldn't let her have his hand or have her hand in marriage. So him and his twin brother moved to Utah during the gold rush. Then after the town he lived in became abandoned, he liked it so much out there, he just decided to stay. And he didn't actually die until 1923 when he was in his 70s. And there was no report of him eating himself to death. So got to kind of watch them local legends.
Oh, I like the idea of him eating himself to death, though. That's so unusual. Like,
yeah. No, it's hard to believe, you know? It would have been one thing if he starved up in the cold and he's an angry spirit,
yeah.
but no, man, she dug in. She's got newspaper clippings, like he was in the newspaper 4 or 5 times. Yeah, she got in deep.
So it's probably like small town gossip, like, you know, he was a big pig at someone's Sunday dinner one time, and people started, you know, just gossiping, and it grew and grew and grew into this story.
I guess he was actually pretty, like, he was the town hermit, but like people would go up and give him stuff and like visit with him. He was supposed to be a really friendly guy.
Yeah.
So I don't know where all these hitchhiker and rummaging through your camping stuff, you know, just as local legends.
I love the idea of picking up a hitchhiker and then they disappear, and then you realize you've just encountered, you know, and you've just been chilling.
When we were on the road, there were a lot of, like, we'd heard a lot of stories from other kids about ghost trains and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I'd never seen a ghost train, but I mean, a lot of stories that were similar.
I actually went, it's kind of funny. I was on a little vacation and I was by myself going from this lake, and then there's this little town and they're famous for a ghost train. They're claim to fame. So it's one of those, the gas station is the post office, is the grocery store, you know, it's like a town like that, like a town of 30 people or whatever it is. But anyways, they're famous for this ghost train. And so I was by myself. I was driving back to the hotel from being at the lake all day, and I was like, I'm going to take a detour. So there I am on the middle of Saskatchewan prairies all by myself, going to this little town. And I sat out on this train track where supposedly people will see this ghost train appears quite often, but didn't come for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I was like 3 o'clock in the morning trying to find my way back to the town where I'm supposed to be going. But it was kind of cool. I was really hoping I'd see something, but
I mean, we used to sleep out on the train tracks all the frickin' time. I'd never seen them, but I mean, there are kids that ride tracks for 10 years, you know, and some of them have those stories.
yeah,
But
stories.
I've heard not even just hobo trains, but like Abraham Lincoln's train is supposed to be haunted because they took him like across the country or whatever. And I heard that's a pretty big one, but just tons of those ghost train stories.
Yeah, yeah, that's pretty cool. That's wild. So
Be cool to see.
I know, just once, right? That's what
Yeah.
I was so excited. I'm like, nobody would ever want to do that with me. And I was alone and I'm like, okay, I'm doing it. I'm gonna sit out here tonight because yeah.
How long did you sit there?
Oh, I probably sat there like 3 hours or so. I had a coffee and I just hung out by myself and yeah. The scariest part about the whole thing was somehow I got myself onto gravel roads and it is the middle of the night in the
Yeah.
prairies. No, and I'm like, hey, getting lost out here is more scary. Need to find my way back to my hotel, but yeah, it was good anyways. Yeah, so well, my last ghost story, it's actually probably the most active kind of scary one. So that we have a area in town called Riverside Meadows, and it was all farmland. But when it was being developed for, the town was expanding out. It was quite remote at first, obviously at the edge of town. And so this family was building their new house, but there had been no houses there before. It was farmland basically that town was moving out. And when the basement was being dug, the construction people found this like really thick layer of ashes. And and it was too big for a campfire. It was like a
Oh,
big layer of ashes. And there was no explanation for it. There was never a house there before. And it was deep. It was quite deep down. So anyways, they weren't really sure what that was about. So they built the house and completed it. And then the Phillips family moved in. And so it was as soon as they moved in, stuff started happening. They would have stuff banging and noises and stuff. One of the creepiest things is, so the girl Teresa Phillips actually wrote a story called Angry Ashes about this, and they've been featured in even more ghost stories of Alberta as well. But her younger brother was in the basement, and there would be flashes of blue flames that would creep along the ceiling of the basement. It was like fire, and then they would disappear, but there would be no burn marks or anything. So it was like phantom fire going through. And they would just have strange things happening. And then one time the dad, when he was first hooking up utilities, he was trying to get the utilities hooked up. So he was working on something, and the mom was kind of watching to the side or whatever, and they knocked down a blowtorch, and they don't know how it was by itself or whatever, and it knocked over and there was an explosion, and his mom like flung, I guess it like flung her. And they think that was paranormal. Like there was no reason for it to like knock over or whatever. It kind of just happened on its own. And the explosion part was kind of bigger than warranted, gas line or anything. So they think that was a paranormal type thing as well. So they never have figured out what the ashes were that they put their basement through, but the house remained haunted. Like there's things going on ever since they built it. So
what Alberta wouldn't be the Vikings wouldn't have made it. Like I know they went to like Newfoundland but they wouldn't have made it to Alberta, would they have?
No, I don't.
So I mean,
thinking like what would be the ashes, right? Like
big ashes bodies, Native Americans burning opposing tribe, maybe. I don't know.
It's got to be something more like that. Makes more sense for where geographically we are. But, So anyways, and she wrote a story about it, and she herself never went in the basement. I guess the basement was the scariest part. But
are there still people living there?
I think there is. Yeah, it's still a home. So, and it sounds like it's still has little things going on or whatever. It'd actually be interesting to reach out and see if you could talk to the family and see, how activity's going.
Yeah.
It was written.
Yeah, no, they're probably so tired of people reaching out, like the people who lived in the Amityville house.
Oh gosh, can you imagine? Yeah.
That would have been nuts.
Yeah.
Would you live in that house?
Oh, I don't know about that one. I don't know. You?
Would I? No, absolutely. I wouldn't live on the block.
I mean, because, I'm sure a lot of it's exaggerated or whatever, but there was murders that took place. There's violent deaths that took place in that home. So,
Yeah.
I mean, if ever there's going to be, some scary activity, would you live in, I think it's changed now where Sharon Tate, where all the Manson murders happened. Would you live in that property? Because that property was supposedly haunted as well after.
Unless this podcast takes off really big, I'm not going to have to worry about ever living in Sharon Tate's old house. We used to party in a Manson house, though. There was one, out in Lancaster where we lived.
Yeah.
I don't remember which one of his followers, but they had, it was a man and wife and a bunch of kids, and they were Manson followers. They all lived out there, and the house was up. It's probably one of the oldest houses in Lancaster. And we used to party there all the time. And people would, say they saw this or saw that, and probably just teenagers screwing with each other. And
but
we're doing
probably,
mushrooms and
no actual murders took place there, right?
No, I think he did kill his whole family.
Oh,
yeah.
nice.
And it was weird because California, where we lived, there were no basements.
Yeah.
But that place actually had a basement, and then it had this bell tower thing that was 2 stories high, and it went into the basement. It's like the perfect place to party when you were kids.
That's so freaky.
We tried to throw a show out there. Our band tried to play out there. We got all set up, and then some lady drove by and said she was calling the cops, and it would have been awesome to play there, but.
Oh, so it was abandoned when you were there.
Yeah, it was
dilapidated. I thought you were hanging with the Manson followers or whatever.
No.
What?
No, it'd probably been abandoned since the 70s, and it was all trashed out.
See, I would go there. That's pretty cool, an old abandoned place. But to buy a house and live there with your, raising your kids and whatever. Where there's I don't know. There's actually a story, and I'd like to go to this house again. I went past it, and I don't know if they tore it down or not, but there was a politician from a little town close by here. And I don't know what happened to him. He snapped under stress, and he killed 6 family members plus the hired man. And this great big old, and it's a beautiful old house or whatever, but same thing, that's the Amityville kind of thing. He just snapped, and family, all the kids, everything. So that'd be freaky to stay in that house too.
Well, they tried, you got to think about that, because that Manson house, he killed his whole family and then killed himself. And right now we're going through a mental health crisis.
Yeah.
But maybe instead of just going to the Walmart and shooting up a whole bunch of people like they do now, they're not connected with their families anymore, right?
Yeah.
But people used to do that kind of crap all the time. Just going off their whole family and then themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's so bizarre. So the Amityville guy, apparently he was being possessed or whatever. But when regular people, who knows what's going on in their mind, that they just snap or have a temporary, break or something like that. That's crazy scary.
Yeah.
But I'd be scared to live. I don't know that I'd buy a place like that. Or here in I think they were from Ontario. I'm sure you've heard of Paul Bernardo and Carla Homolka.
I haven't heard them.
Oh, you should look into that story. It's so disturbing. They were young, really good looking, like a Barbie. People call them the Barbie couple because they're just both blonde, and they were very, successful, and just kind of had everything together. And turns out they were weirdos, and he liked other young girls, and so she would kidnap girls and bring them as presents to him, and they would rape and torture and do all this stuff to them. And she even took her own sister and presented him, and they videotaped it, and it was this whole thing. Like, it's a big thing. I think they had to tear down their house. This is not that old of a story, and they had to tear down their house. They couldn't sell it or anything. And they're in jail. But she took a plea deal. The big controversy was because she said she was a victim of him.
Yeah.
But then they found all these recordings where she's like, she was no victim. She was really a participant in the whole disgusting thing. Yeah.
That happens quite a bit too, man.
Yes, and how do you get two nuts that, like, two people that kind of come up with crazy plans together, and how do they hook up? Ugh.
I mean, you have the Epstein thing, but there was one, like, I think it was 2012 when they were caught. The dude had abducted a little girl. I think his wife helped him abduct a little girl, and he used to keep her under a box under the bed.
Oh God, I think I saw something on the internet about that.
Yeah, and then he got her pregnant. She actually had 2 kids.
Yeah.
And he had her live in the backyard with the kids in a tent. And the whole time this was happening, like the 20 years that he's got this girl pregnant and everything, he was on parole and probation.
And nobody's like looking around the property and seeing this.
Parole officers are showing up. Like, how the hell do you get away with that kind of crap, man?
Oh, that's so crazy.
And that's back, like, LA County police back then were not, like, I know now you see people walking out of the store with thousands of dollars worth of crap. That was not like that 10 years ago.
Yeah.
They were out to find something to put you in their little private prison system. So I don't know how the hell he got away with that.
It's always so weird to me that neighbors never see stuff in situations like that, where there's like prisoners hidden in a shed in the backyard and stuff. Like, the neighbors never see or hear anything. Like, you'd think you'd hear cries and stuff or something, right? Like,
yeah, you'd think. He was on a big plot of land, so his wasn't like he could get away with it. But you'd still think they would search his property when he's on parole.
When somebody's on parole, you'd think they'd be checking around pretty heavily. Yeah, and it's so bizarre when the wives are so, compliant. Like, have they been just abused to the point where the Carla Homolka thing, like, she was just as evil as he was, straight up. They weren't together long enough that she was a victim, I think, and she's out, and she's changed her name and married and has a great life now.
What do you think she's doing at that? I mean, that's weird, right? Like,
it's bizarre. Like, how do you have that whole piece of your life and now you're just completely normal? I mean, I like to think people can change and rehabilitate and whatever, but like,
not from that far.
So bizarre. And it's got to be so irritating to the parents of the young girls that they murdered or whatever, that she's now married, having kids, and living the life that their daughters.
She has kids?
Yeah, she got out and she got remarried, and has a great life, I think. So it's very upsetting, and she's changed her name, obviously, because people hate her.
How long was she in prison for?
Oh, I'd have to look it up. Like, because she did a heavy plea deal to get him put away, like really put away, threw him under the bus. And then after they had already done that, they found all this evidence up in the ceiling piles or whatever of her, like, she was recording the whole thing, and it was just weird. She was terrible.
That's crazy. Well, they had that, what was that lady from Louisiana, LaBeouf, or, oh man, she used to torture all her servants. I think they even did like an American Horror Story on her.
Is that like an older story?
Yeah.
Yeah. She was crazy.
Yeah, a lot of crazy people throughout the world, man.
Wasn't there one? Where was it? And one of the servants was tied to the stove, and she actually started a fire just to get everybody out of there. It's a very old story.
Was that the one from New Orleans with the LaBeouf? Or I know she was French.
Yeah, maybe that is the exact same one, because one of the servants, finally, and they found her like chained to the stove.
Yeah.
And
And they in the attic, they found all sorts of crazy crap going
yeah,
on.
yeah. So fun people in the world, honestly.
I know, man. He's walking by you at Walmart. You don't even know.
I know, right? Yeah. No, it's scary stuff.